What's good, ninjas? Design Syndrome here. In this video I'll show you how to take something that looks like this to something that looks like almost out of a 3D software. You have been going crazy lately over on my Instagram over some of the last pieces that I've been making, so the time has come. I'll show you how to achieve this effect from scratch, all within Adobe Photoshop. And by the end of the video I'll show you a cool way to take the effect even further. This effect is really cool to add an enigmatic and sort of eerie modern sci-fi hieroglyphic feel to your work. And when done correctly, it can really bring that really tactile feel that will really draw the eye to your pieces. So without further ado, let's just jump into Photoshop. So first let's create our new file. Let's make it 4000 by 4000. 300 dpi. This is important because this is a very layer style heavy effect, and those is actually scale with your file dpi. So if you want to use my same values, you need to have the same dpi. First, I like to make a solid color layer. Let's make it around 70% gray. Let's name this layer background. And this is because we'll be able to change the color of this layer later. Now I'll drop in a small composition that I had already made. And for this effect, try using compositions that combine shapes that are bolder and blocky with other ones that bring in those finer details. This works really well to create this intricate feeling of something that has a lot of depth. So now let's put this within a group. I'll show you why later this is important. Let's name it Emboss Elements. And now let's add the effects to it through the blending options panel. You can access it from the effects tab here. Let's collapse this so we have more room. First, we're gonna get rid of the fill opacity. This is because we don't want to deal with the content of the layer we're applying the effects to, but we do, however, want to maintain its shape. So all the layer style effect we apply to it render showing that container form. Main difference with opacity is that if I make a quick bevel and emboss and I bring down the opacity, you can see how it's also affecting the layer style effects, and we don't want that. So opacity up and bring the fill opacity down. Now bevel and emboss, first effect we need to apply to it, but we're gonna spice it up by adding some features to make it a lot more realistic than the stock Photoshop one. Come on, Photoshop, hit me up. So first, bevel and emboss. The style, set it to emboss because it's gonna give us that nice smooth transition from the inside of the shape and to the outside of it. The depth, bring it to the top. Technique, smooth. I found that chisel hard and chisel soft. If you're not using perfectly vectorized shape, and you can get some janky artifacts that don't really look cool, so smooth should look perfect. Direction to down. The size, let's bring it around 10 to 12, maybe 12, and the soften to around 8. And remember, for this effect, the key to selling it is that it needs to be fairly subtle, because when we start to add the effects one on top of the other, it can get muddy and it will look janky really fast. So now for the angle, check use global illumination. This will do that every effect that we use that uses directional lighting, it all matches and comes from the same angle, so it looks cohesive. So let's leave this at 75 and the other angle, which will be the altitude, to 45. Glass contour, leave it at linear. And the highlight, again, this one, if you had it on normal, set it to linear dodge, white, opacity 10%, and the shadow to linear burn, black, and opacity 6 to 8%. Again, really subtle about this, guys. We are using these blending modes because when we start to stack up the effects, these are the ones that are gonna give us that really nice, rich contrast in the highlights and the shadows. Let me know in the comments below if you would like an in-depth guide for blending modes. Now, next we need to create an inner shadow. So to illustrate this, let's imagine that this is a cross-section of the document we are working on right now. We have the indentation here for the bevel and emboss effect, our light source being over here and projecting down onto our file or document. What we are seeing from the stock bevel and emboss effect on Photoshop is a highlight. We're seeing a highlight here and we're seeing a shadow in this part, right? And the light being here and projecting off of the bevel, we should have a projected shadow here in this part with a core really dark shadow on this part and then a nice fall off to the inside of our document. So let's do that right now. This one, let's set it to linear burn, color black, opacity around to 12 to 10%, angle 75, distance 4 and size, distance 5 actually, and size 5. And this is gonna act as our core part, the darker part of our shadow, because we don't need it to project that far, but also we don't want it showing on the other side of our shape. That's why we gave it a really small, subtle distance, right? The contour, leave it at linear, noise 10%. Now for the second part of our shadow, let's duplicate it here pressing this plus sign. I had already here set up. And this one, set it to multiply, color black, to around 15 to 20%. Keep the same angle. The distance, we're gonna start to bump it up to around 15 maybe, and the size you can go more crazy with it, because this is the part of the shadow that we needed to diffuse it a little bit to create that nice fall off of the shadow. That's why we are using the multiply blending mode, because it's gonna help us tame the contrast a little bit and help us manage it easier when we start playing with the colors and the lighting. Now to this we need to add a gradient overlay, and this one we're gonna set it to overlay at around 40%. The gradient needs to be from a dark gray to a lighter gray. Let's press OK. Style linear, blend mode, overlay, I think I already said it. The angle, make it match the lighting we are using for the effects, so 75%. And the scale, you can play with it, see how it looks. If you make it smaller, that will make a more of a sharp transition, but anything from 30 to 100% should look fine. The method, leave it at perceptual, and what this is basically doing is acting as our light source hitting the top part of our graphic, making it look lighter at the top, and then of course gradually darker towards the bottom, mimicking the light source fall off. Next, the bounce light. It's because the light source is reflecting directly into the part of the bevel and emboss that's showing the highlight, right? So we should have a bounce light here that has a nice fall off. It's really subtle, but that has a fall off towards, again, the inside of our graphic. So let's do that. To create the bounce light, we are gonna duplicate our bottommost inner shadow. I have it mine right here. You do it with the plus sign here. And enabling it, we're gonna do a screen blending mode in white color. The opacity, we're gonna set it to a bit lower than we have our multiply. So this would be like a 12. It's really subtle, the difference. The angle, we are gonna switch off the use global light, because since this is the bounce light, we need it to be opposite to our projected shadow. So we're gonna turn off use global light, and we're gonna switch the angle to the other side of our graphic. The distance and the size, you can leave sort of the same. Maybe the size, you make it a bit more sharp, so something like 25. And you can see already with these effects that we've been adding, it's starting to look a lot more cohesive and realistic. But of course, we can take it even further to really close the effect. Now, lastly, what we should have is, because of the light source is hitting that angle, and it's also refracting to the top part of our document. So we should have a really bright highlight in the corner itself, and then a really nice fall off to the outside of our graphic to really close the effect and really finish selling it. So let's do that right now. Now, to do the highlight, we're gonna mimic what we did for the shadows, but opposite. So we are gonna create a drop shadow. And since this will be the brightest part of our highlight, we're gonna set it to white, and the blending mode, you guessed it, we're gonna use linear dodge. The opacity, we're gonna keep it really subtle at around 6%. The distance, we're gonna set it at 5, the spread at 0, and the size, again, in 5, because we need this to show right at the edge of our graphic, but also not showing on the side of the shadow. Now we need to duplicate this drop shadow, again with the plus icon here. I have mine already. This one, we're gonna set it to screen, color white, and the opacity to 15%. Keep the same angle. The distance, we can set it to 10, and the size from 30 to 40. Again, the same as we did with the shadow, this is gonna act as the fall off for our highlight. And that's kind of it for our layer styles. Now we're gonna add some light texture and lighting effects to make it look more natural and cohesive. So first, to keep it all nice and organized, let's make a new group and call it texture. Okay. And first that we're gonna add here, it's a gradient overlay. This is to match the light source fall off that we had in our layer style, but to the rest of our scene or whatever it is our graphic is displaying in. So let's create a new layer. And with the gradient tool, we have it right here. Let's create a gradient that follows the direction of the layer styles we had. Then we double click the layer here, and in the gradient, again, we make it from dark gray to a light gray. Okay. Okay, and we set the blending mode to overlay and the fill to around 80%. And as you can see, we are getting some banding that looks awful. That's a big no-no. So to diffuse it, we are gonna add some texture to it. And a quick and easy way to do this that looks also fire is to use the point-to-size noise. And I think I've shown you this specific way of doing noise like 100 times in this channel, but let's do it again really quick. First, let's make a new layer. Let's go to Edit, Fill it with 50% gray. Now let's go to Filter, Pixelate, Point-to-size, make it the smaller you can, that's 3. Now we need to kill the color for this noise, so let's go to Image, Adjustments, Hue and Saturation, bring the saturation all the way down, bring the blending mode to overlay, the fill you can make it a little less harsh at around 40%, bring it below the gradient map, and as you can see, it looks a bit janky, so we're gonna add just a tad of Gaussian blur to diffuse it a bit more. So let's go to Blur, Gaussian blur, and just add 1 point. So that banding that we had going on is now just occurring inside the pattern of the noise itself, and we don't really see it. Voila, there we have it. It's starting to look really great. Now, on top of this, let's create a new group and call it Lighting. And inside it, let's bring a layer adjustment, curves layer. And in here, let's bring the soft highlights a bit down to decrease the contrast. And let's do the same for the midtones. Now let's switch off to the green channel. And here, let's bump the shadows and bring the highlight just a bit down. This is gonna give us that really nice and rich, like greenish shadows. Now let's do a similar color on the red channel. Something like this looks great. We're gonna leave the blue channel untouched, or don't, it's your call. We are doing this to really contaminate the colors a bit, so they don't look as pure white or pure black, because they are maybe refracting some light of something that's outside our frame, right? This gives it a much more natural and believable feel. Here I'm gonna go inside the layer styles again and bring down the opacity of the gradient overlay effect to around 20. Yeah, I think it looks better there. And there, as you can see, with the bounce light and the projecting shadows are really helping us to sell this realistic embossing effect. And remember that we placed the graphics all within a group and then we did the layer styles to the group itself. Well, that's because I can go within that group and maybe I can start to type something and all the effects are applying live. Or I can even bring in some new graphics and put them within the composition. Or I can bring some graphics from Illustrator even, just copy and paste them. And all the effects are being applied live in a non-destructive way because we placed the layer style effects on the group itself. It's all being rendered live by this layer setup. So, okay guys, this file that I'm working on right now up to this point, it's called the Hard-press Lite, and it's available right now in the Shinobi Stash, which is my free collection of design ninja grade assets packed with textured templates, mockups, graphics, and more to help you experiment and speed up your projects. You can grab it at any time from designsyndrome.com. But if you want to support the channel further and help me to keep making these videos, I've also launched a full version of the Hard-press. It includes a bigger template with even more customization options, a layer style pack featuring over 30 unique letterpress and emboss styles I perfected through trial and error, and a super handy action pack to integrate this effect seamlessly into your workflow with just a few clicks. You can check everything out from the links below. Now let's go back to the tutorial to take this up a notch by adding some texture and playing with the lighting to make it more dramatic. Now let's bring in a concrete texture and a paper texture. The concrete texture is from the Street Smart, the free version, and the paper texture is also available for free on the Shinobi Stash. All the textures that I aim to use on my tutorials, you can grab them for free so you can arrive at the same conclusion as me from following the tutorial. Let's disable the transparent paper texture for now, and the concrete one, let's bring it below the gradient overlay that we did. Let's set the blending mode to overlay, and the fill, let's set it to around 40%. And here you can use any image you want, really just make sure that it doesn't have that much color if you want to achieve like this uniform look. You can unsaturate it by making it black and white as we did with the noise, and you can also adjust the values so it displays correctly on the overlay mode. For that, let's select the texture, let's go to image, adjustment and curves, and if your texture is really dark, just bump up the curve of your texture, or you can bring it down if it's too light, as I think I'm gonna do to this one because it looks better with a darker texture. Like that looks better. And now we can bring in the transparent paper texture, put it on top of our gradient overlay. Let's enlarge it a little bit, move it around, and let's change the fill to 20% or 30%. And boom, there you have some hefty, really gnarly texture, right? Wrong, you wanna see something gnarly? Okay, let's go back to our lightning group and let's disable our previous lightning configuration that we did. Let's duplicate it, and in the duplicate we're gonna go crazy and make it really dark, you know what I mean? Let's bring it down here, and you see on the curves this straight line we are getting here. That means we are starting to clip the values and we're starting to lose some information there, and we really don't want that. Or maybe we do, I don't know, it's your design call. But let's fix it for this image in particular. Maybe we do want that really burnt, aggressive look, but I want to show you how to do it proper, and then you can distort the rules at your leisure, right? Let's drag this node up and bring a new one from the bottom and lift this till we get like a nice curve, and then you see how we recover a lot of that lost information, right? So I'm gonna play with it some more. And boom, there you have it. Looks really crazy. You can see all the amazing detail and how we get a realistic fall off from the contrast on the highlights, right? As if the light was refracting with a bit more contrast on the top part of our image and then losing power as it goes down, right? And you can also make variations on your layer styles. One thing that I want to show you that's really crazy, it's if you go to the group that has the layer styles that we did, we go to layer style and scale effects, this dialog slider will come on, and we can move the scale of all the effects within the layer group itself, which functions almost like a slider for the effect itself. What the f, it's crazy. Be careful, don't go too overboard with it because you can start to break the effect, right? But if you keep it within bounds, it's really crazy. You can play with it more and get some crazier results and overall have more control over it. And what's really cool about this layer setup is that you can go back and start maybe disabling the texture, giving it more power, disabling, mix and matching, then maybe you use only the noise, right? You can make it more aggressive, you enable the paper texture, and you can even go into the gradient, and by selecting the gradient tool, you can move it around, you can change the angle, and really try different things and go crazy. You can move your composition around, trying different things. You can go into the background layer and see with a clearer color or a darkened one. You can go and maybe give it some red. You can start changing the hue. One thing that I recommend though is when you change the color, you don't go to the overly saturated ones because it won't look as good. Keep it all within this inner circle bounds, right? And that will give you the better results, right? Like a cool yellow, something like that. Look, that's crazy. I really like how it looks on the gray, right? Something like that, that's really, really dramatic. And of course, you can create more variations of your layer styles. You can play with the hues a bit more till you get stuff that's really crazy, right? So, all right, guys, that's it for this one. Hope you liked it. Hopefully learned something, gained some inspiration, or learn a new trick or two to try out. But before I go, I wanted to be real with you for a second and share a bit of insight of what I aim to build here with Design Syndrome. One of the philosophies that guide my work is that knowledge shouldn't be hidden behind a paywall. What I aim for is to share the processes that I use on my creative workflow so you can understand the tools deeply and apply them so you can unlock the potential of your work, and not just relying on an action pack and a texture, leaving you completely devoid of any understanding of the tool or the idea. The asset store comes into play for those who want to support the channel while getting something in return. I put a lot of work into crafting the templates, the textures, the graphics and action packs, so everything is really practical and quick to use. Maybe grabbing a convenient asset pack to speed things up and empower your workflow further. But remember, real power comes from understanding what's happening under the hood, so you can bring it to your work with intention to fulfill a vision. What I aim to sell is convenience, insight and understanding I will always try to give out for free, be it in my YouTube, Instagram or the Discord channel. So that's the brand. We seek knowledge and we share it. We are ninjas. We work from the shadows to serve the light. If you know where that's from, oh, I gotta sell. If you know where that's from, you're a real She, leave it in the comments down below. If any of that resonated with you, hit the like button, subscribe, share it with a friend, whatever it is, it helps the channel a lot. So with that out of the way, see you on the next one, ninjas. Fuck peace, wish you conflict. Shit.